Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. So let's continue our investigation of the repetition structure. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the user enter an integer here, and that integer will represent a number line. So for example, if they entered the number 2, then I would expect to see over here -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, all evenly spaced with a space in between the numbers based on the user input. Okay, so over here I've created a txt user num, btn gen num line, and then I have a label lbl result. All right, so let's go ahead and double click on the button, and we're going to create the comments like declarations. Get user input, calculation, and output. So the first thing that I do here is I ask, what are those things that I need from the user, and what are those things that I give back to the user? So if I go back over here, it looks like I'm definitely going to need a user num. Okay, so I'll say dim user num as integer. Next, what am I going to give back to the user? Well, I'm definitely going to generate some sort of an output. So I think what I'll do is I'll create a string called dim output as string, and set that to nothing at first, as you can see over here. Anytime I see a pattern of numbers, remember, we're supposed to be displaying a number line. So let me just put a comment over here. I'm going to erase this in just a moment. For example, -2, and then -1, and then 0, and then 1, and then 2, say, for example. Hey, I see the pattern. The pattern is that I can either start from -2 and increment numbers, or I can start from the number 2 and decrement by 1. So this is what I see. Even though this is a line, I see this circular motion that generate the -2, then the -1, then the 0, the 1, and the 2. Or if I'm decrementing, I see the 2, then the 1, then the 0, then the -1, -2. So don't think about numbers on a line. Think about numbers in a circle, right? And that it's the repetition structure that's going to be able to generate those numbers. Okay. So first of all, I got to create a counter. Dim counter as integer. Let's go ahead and get the user number. So that's going to be convert dot to int32, and that's going to come from that text box. You see what I do? I just type in txt. That's going to give me a listing of all the text boxes. Well, I only have one text box, so I double click dot text. Yes.
Is there a reason why we're doing integers? I know you had mentioned we were going to be dealing with whole numbers, so.
That's exactly right, yeah. So since I'm dealing with a whole number, because the user is being asked to enter a whole number, that's why we deal with an integer. Now, could you use another integer data type like a short or a byte? Yeah, sure, you could do that as well. Integer is one of the more common ones. But that certainly doesn't stop you from using another data type. All right, good. Now, let's go to the calculation section. And so the user wants to see a certain number or a number line. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the counter to the user number, because I want this particular code fragment to be an explanation or a demonstration of decrementing through numbers. So let's say, for example, if the user number is, I'm going to put a comment here. If the user number is 2, well, then the counter is going to go from 2 to 1, and then to 0, and then to -1, and then to -2, like that, right? So we're going to keep on counting as long as the counter is greater than or equal to the negative of the user number. Do you see that? So if the user number is 2, we keep on decrementing until we get to the number that the user entered times -1, or the negative of the user number. Right? So if it was 5, we would go all the way to -5, down to -5. If it was 10, we would go all the way down to -10, so forth and so on. So we are counting down until we get to the negative of the user number. All right, so that's what we want to do. Let's get a while statement. So while the counter is greater than or equal to the negative of the user number. If the user number is 2, we are going to go, because remember, see, counter is now 2. So we're going to go from 2 all the way down to -2, as long as it's greater than or equal to -2. And we are working our way from right to left on the number line. Does that make sense? Comments or questions? So if you want to visualize this, let me just put some numbers here. Pretend that the user number is 2. So that means we are eventually going to be doing this. We're going to be displaying this. Okay. Counter is set to user number, which is 2. Okay, so the counter is 2. Is the counter greater than or equal to the user num? Yeah, the user number is 2. Okay, so we're going to go through this. Then we're going to decrement the counter. So then the counter will be 1. Is 1 greater than -2? Yes. Is 0 greater than -2? Yes. Is -1 greater than -2? Yes. Is -2 greater than or equal to -2? Yes. And then the next number that would be generated is the -3, but we don't display it because -3 is not greater than or equal to -3, so that would be the end of the while statement. That's how I want you to visualize it. Okay, so now over here, what do I need to do? I need to display the number. So output is going to be the old output, right? Now, remember, we are concatenating numbers before with the space. So let me do this. I'm going to put a space over here. All right, so what I need to do is I need you to put an old space, concatenate that with whatever the user number is. So we're going to convert dot to string, whatever the value of counter is. And then I'm going to concatenate that with the output. Now, let's see why I did it this way. This seems kind of backwards compared to the previous code that we did with the repetition structure. All right, so let's see what happens. I'm going to just generate a comment over here, and I'm going to erase this in just a moment. Well, the first thing is, what is the value of output? The value of output, it's blank. There's nothing in it. What is the value of counter? Let's say that the user enters the number 2, as in this particular example. Okay, so what is the output going to be? The output is going to be, well, first of all, it looks like there's a space here, so let me use an underscore to represent that space. Then the value of counter, which in this case is 2. And then I'm going to append to it the output. Well, what is the output? It's nothing. So the old value of the output looks like this. Okay, so that's what this output statement does. Let me put this comment over here. This is what the output statement looks like. This is the old value of output. This is the new value of output. Okay, now the counter needs to decrement, so we can just say counter minus equals 1. Or you could say counter is going to be assigned counter minus 1. Both of these statements do the same thing. In other words, you are decrementing the counter by 1. So if it's 2, now it's going to be 1. Okay, let's see what happens now. I don't know if I need any more code. Let's just see what happens if I continue this execution. So now we've reached the end of the while statement. We go back over here and we ask, is counter, which is now the number 1. So let me just go ahead and put a statement over here. I'll put the number 1 here. Because it was 2, it's being decremented. Now it's 1. So is 1 greater than or equal to -2? Yeah, it's greater than. All right, so what are we going to do? We're going to take the current output, and we're going to append to it. So it looks like the first thing I do is I add a space. So the output is going to have a space. And then it looks like I put the number, which in this case is 1. And then I concatenate that to the existing output, which is this right here. It's the space and the 2. Now I take that counter value, subtract 1 from it, so it goes from 1 to 0. Go back over here. Is 0 greater than or equal to -2? Yeah, it's greater than -2. So we take the output and we append to it. What do I do? Okay, so I'm going to give it a space. And then after the space, I forgot that right there. So I'm going to give it a space, and then I'm going to print to it the actual number, which in this case is counter, so that's going to be 0. and then I'm going to output the output after that, which is all this over here, the output. I reduced the value of counter by 1, so now that's going to go to -1. And is -1 greater than or equal to the user number, which is -2? Yeah, it's greater than, so we're going to do this again. And then eventually it's going to be -2, so we do this again. Eventually counter is going to be -3. Is -3 greater than or equal to -2? No, it's not. So end of program. At this point, then, I can output the result. So I go over here to output and say label result.text is going to be whatever output is, which is a string. Okay, so let me run the program. You see the code down here. And let me type in the number 3. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. How about 5? We know that this should accommodate all the numbers. Yep, there it is. From -5 all the way to 5. And then maybe something smaller like 2 perhaps. -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Perfect. So there's your number line. So what this is a good example of is how are you going to be displaying data on the output? Typically what I've done is I've put the variable output over here after this assignment operator, right? Output is being assigned to output, which is the old value of output. But notice that in this case, if we're going to be decrementing, if we're going to be working our way backwards from a positive number all the way down to a negative number, then I've got to rearrange these items. So in essence, I'm doing this. Let me just give you a visual representation. So what I'm doing over here is I'm going to put a space and the number 2. And then I'm going to put a space and the number 1. And then I'm going back. See with the cursor, I keep on moving it to the very beginning. Then I'm going to put a space and a 0. And then I'm going to put a space and a -1. Finally, I'm going to put a space and a -2. So what this does is it works backwards. That's why the output is over here at the end, and I am appending all the stuff before the output. So put this before the output. Well, if my output happens to be this, I put a space and the number, so a space and the number, and then so forth and so on, all the way down. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.